anything, but now it's just
it's muscle memory. It comes back quickly.
Oh yeah,
it just complains a lot more now.
Sorry,
Nick, is your mic plugged in?
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tap it.
Why?
Yeah, you're in the wrong mic.
You're in the wrong jack. It sounded a little tinny. Didn't sound bad. It just didn't sound like the quality of the mic that you have.
Yeah, he's got a high-speed mic. We're starting off perfectly. See what happens? Nick is on time, so there's a technical issue. We can't,
Technical.
Is it better?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Say something again, Nick.
This is you're trolling me now.
Okay.
No, I hear you. I hear you 100%. Oh, all right.
All right.
There you go. Now
There it is.
Oh my god.
Okay, when's the chat going to start saying boomer?
Literally already
live?
happened. It already happened.
Oh, I didn't even know we were live. I'm about to start saying some crazy stuff. Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
You're very welcome, man.
I saw the red tag go up. We are live for 1 minute and 10 seconds now.
And on time, by the way. On time, for Viva Frei. He likes to be right on the nose. So
I got to be like Cardi B. That guy was okay, and no one and everything was consensual. So just so everybody knows the story that we're talking about.
People still don't believe it.
Nick has been on time now 2 times in a row.
In the same week.
Yeah. I'm working hard here.
Turning over a new leaf right now.
Okay, I have 0 plans for
thank God.
the show other than to have fun. So what is going on, Nate?
All right. I have something amazing that I want to share with you guys. But so I've done a deep dive into voter ID, right?
Ooh.
And whether it is racist or not. Now, obviously, it absolutely is. Everybody here believes that. No, I'm just joking. Because I know Nick is like, what? What? Don't say that.
I'm like, it definitely is racist.
But let me explain something. All right. So first, you know how sometimes you get to the political issues with these things and you don't even realize how bad politically all this stuff is. And then you do some research and come to find out, if you're talking about voter ID laws, every single state has the similar voter ID laws. Matter of fact, the Democrats in Congress voted in the Senate. Let's just talk about the Senate. It was a 92-2 vote to require every state in the union to have voter ID. Now, the law was passed in 2002. It's called the Help America Vote Safe Act or something. It's HAVA. It's HAVA. You can look it up and Google it. And it requires that every state must have some form of voter ID. So when you look at that and then you compare it to the states, to the voting ID laws in the states, it's the argument that some states have more stringent voter ID laws versus others is just a total lie. It literally, every state, even New York, requires at some point in time, either your first time or when you register, to present a form of voter or photo identification at either the polls or at the registration process. It is the whole theory of the voter ID thing is like a total lie, and it's so weird. I never really understood what the argument was, but when you actually look into it, it makes absolutely no sense. Go ahead, Viva. I'm sorry.
Is it for a first vote of any type of vote, or only a first vote for, say, absentee voting or mail-in voting?
Well, let me pull it up because I had it up. Let me pull this up.
It's
I'll read it to you.
It's when you vote for student council the first time. That's when they do it.
No, but you know, one thing though, it's like one thing is that it just makes sense to identify your voter, right? Because there's certain people can vote, certain people can't vote. So how do you know? So here's the actual law. The law is called, let me just make sure, the Help America Vote Act. It was signed into law in 2002 under President Bush, and the Senate voted for it. It was overwhelming, and both Democrats and Republicans voted for it. But it required, this is the requirements. It requires that all first-time voters, right, who registered by mail and have not previously registered in a federal or state election, present a form of voter identification in the appropriate state. So you have to present either a current and valid photo identification or a copy of a utility bill, bank statement, government check, paycheck, or other government document to show that your name and address. So if your first time voting at any federal election, you got to show either a current valid photo ID or one of these supplements, current utility bill, and that law and that piece of the law is the law in every single state. Because I actually went and checked Georgia, which has the most they call it egregious voting. This is their law parrots this, and so what that means is that every person who's voting has the ability has already gone through the identification requirements. The issue is with voter ID laws is whether making them just bring that ID on every subsequent vote. But every voter has gone through this voter ID requirements.
Well,
so go ahead.
Kevin Johnson here says Nevada has no ID requirement either when you register or when you vote.
No, tell him to actually look up this act. It's just for federal, but it's for federal elections specifically. But all states have adopted it as the minimum.
Now, was there a grandfather clause where if you voted prior to 2002 and were already registered, you didn't have to subsequently present an ID?
Yeah, I'm assuming that this is for going 2002 and forward. So I'm not thinking this is 2002 and back. So all the new voters had to show either a form of current valid vote. And it's interesting because, like, for instance, Georgia says you can actually use expired Georgia ID. So they're a little looser than it is. But if you're voting in a federal election, president, Senate, House, representative, House, whoever, you have to actually show a valid form of photo ID to register and on your first time to vote. So we in the United States, we all are under this current voter ID law nationally. But now to say that each state can adopt it for their local elections. And that's the difference. Now, some states are saying, well, we want to have this standard for our local elections. And that's where we get the calls of racism versus whether it's nationally applied or not.
Can we talk for a second about the lunacy of people turning down an expired ID as proof of age? Like, that is one of the most frustrating things on earth. It's like you go to the bar and you want to buy a drink and you're like, oh, here's my ID. And they're like, well, that thing's expired. It's like, but I didn't get younger.
If you're going to make a fake ID, obviously you make it expired. I mean, that's the logic behind it.
So what are you pulling it up? What does it say?
It's right there highlighted. If you're voting in Nevada for the first time, registered to vote by mail or online and didn't provide ID when you register, be sure to bring a copy of your photo ID or current utility bill, bank statement, government check, paycheck, or government document that shows your name and address when you vote.
Pull up that super chat. Pull up that super chat because I want him to type my name. What's my name? What's my name? It's Nate the lawyer. Nate the lawyer. Get it right.
I think we can all agree.
There it is. My name is Nate the lawyer for a reason, chump. Boom.
I think everyone can agree that the argument that requiring voter ID is racist is itself a racist argument, and I think it's also an untenable one that admits of other problems. Then it is to say that it's racist for elections, but it's not racist when requiring photo ID to enter a bar or to get a car. Like that, it's not racist in that context, only when it comes to elections.
No. The argument. Listen. The argument, right? The argument for this, and I hate even doing these type of videos, but I got a whole in-depth thing coming up. But the argument has always been that elderly, minority, and younger voters cannot, right, get the photo ID, right? How are they going to get a photo ID? How are they going to get a photo ID? But understand this. Since 2002, if you couldn't get some type of photo ID or couldn't identify yourself, you couldn't vote anyway. So we're talking about all the voters currently should have been able to do that. Now, I do understand the argument that, yes, it disproportionately affects those groups, but based on federal law, if they're registering for the first time anyway, they have to be identified, no matter what state you're in. So this argument that it's just targeting these, then the Democrats who voted for this in 2002 were they also being racist to minority? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because the people who are now saying that that this is racist were the ones who voted overwhelmingly for this law to be put into place to force people to identify themselves through photo identification, either at the polls or when registering. So that's what I'm talking about. The argument, I think, is moot because every voter technically after 2002 had to have been identified, had to show ID to vote.
Now, Nate, can you help me out here? I don't remember because there's there's disparate treatment and disparate impact, right, in employment law.
Yes, correct.
And so like applying the theory, because that's what they always say. They say, oh, well, these groups are disproportionately affected, and therefore this thing is prejudiced against these groups. But that's not exactly how disparate impact works. That's how disparate treatment works, where you target a particular group and treat them.
Already. Took no time at all.
What was that?
We're yellow already. 10 minutes.
Oh,
well, Nick,
voting was mentioned. But yeah, so in employment law, if you have disparate treatment, that's where you pick a particular group and treat them differently up front. And that is more likely to be considered discriminatory practice than disparate impact. Although with disparate impact, you can get there. But I feel like there's a second element to disparate impact that requires something else. So it's like, well, these groups may be more affected, but there's another element. Are you familiar?
Well, listen, I'm going to show you the big brain right now. Right?
Okay.
The big brain. There's a case, a famous Supreme Court case called Washington v. Davis. And now in that case, there were African-American police officers, African-American citizens who wanted to become police officers in the District of Columbia. And the District of Columbia had a written exam. And that written exam come at the end, the effect at the end of when people took the test, they found that something like 70% of applicants or white applicants passed the test, but only something like 20% of black applicants passed the test. The numbers were like crazy like that. So, the black applicants sued. They said the test is obviously racist. Look, not more than 20% of black people can pass it, but so many white people can pass it. Obviously, the test is racist, and we want the Supreme Court to overturn it. So the Supreme Court in that case said, no, the test isn't racist, and we're not going to overturn it because just because the impact seems to have this desperate effect between the races doesn't mean that there was an intent to cause that impact. And that's what you'd have to prove. You kind of have to prove that intent element. And don't get me wrong, in some of these, and I'm going to mention it, in some of these voter ID cases, like in Pennsylvania and I think in North Carolina, you had legislators saying, yes, we want to suppress the black vote, but you got one idiot saying we want to suppress the black vote. And they say, okay, that guy speaks for all voter ID laws across the country, right?
Right.
That person speaks for all. And that's just not the case. Some places where you have higher people immigrating to the state, like in Texas, they're going to have stricter voter ID laws because how did you know who's actually a citizen or not versus somewhere like New York? So that's what Washington v. Davis said. It established that difference between something that just happens. It's kind of like du jour, what's it called? When Justice Thomas was the one that coined it. It was when a neighborhood segregates because white people move out versus when the government says black people can't move in. I forgot it's du jour racism versus I forget the other term.
Yeah. I don't know either, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And we got Dr. Wood in the chat wanting to break down, and this probably have to be another episode completely. About etnicity and race, and he doesn't acknowledge race as actually being a thing. It's a long
that guy wants to get du jour versus de facto. Yeah, John got it.
I think going into the question of whether race is real or ethnicity is real, it's when we're using race, it's colloquially. It's just become common parlance to suggest that a race is one thing or another. I don't think it actually, it doesn't mean anything at all. It's just a categorization system used. So I don't, it doesn't bother me.
No, I don't want to get. I always feel with these conversations, people get trapped up in the definitions. Oh, there is no such thing as come on, really? Obviously there are differences in ethnicities, there's races, and we know what we're talking about. When we're talking
there's diseases that
right. It's just come on, really.
There's diseases that affect certain races and not others. Yeah. You have sickle cell anemia. There's and not just races, but they affect certain religions who have been intermarrying for a certain period of time that they are more susceptible to certain illnesses. Tay-Sachs is the other one. So there are semantics. A white person from South Africa who comes to America is technically an African American, but African American as a term itself is somewhat problematic since Black Americans are not necessarily from Africa. They could be from Jamaica. They could be from the Caribbeans, which may have. So it's all semantics, but we know what we're talking about. skin tone, skin color, and then social things that are adjusted or that are implemented or that affect people differently based on skin color. So we know what the debate is.
The other aspect of this is when you get stuck being a lawyer, and we'll put it that way, you have to deal with two types of definitions. You have the definition of things that are, and then you have the definition that things that are under a statute or in a provision of common law, or as they've developed throughout jurisprudence. Like, that's just how it goes. So, race is defined. It's defined by probably in common law, I would assume, but it may even be defined in federal statutes or state statutes. Like, that's the part we're dealing with. So typically when we're talking about race in regards to law, we're talking very specifically about skin color is going to be the most common implementation of race in law, because it's the readily apparent method by which one would discriminate based on a visual appearance. And that's what they're looking to eliminate is discrimination based on race. And that is largely going to be, I see this person because of the way they look, I don't like them. And that's what they're trying to weed out of the law there. So again, arguing definitions with a lawyer is always going to have the caveat of what is the definition for the purpose with which the discussion is being had.
Well, I'm telling you, part of the reason I said this will have to be another episode is because Dr. Wood he's not going to just shut down easily. So it's a lawyer and a PhD going at it. It will get deep. It's already getting deep.
And the thing that I would suggest is that the lawyer's probably not even arguing with you about whether or not the PhD aspect of it is correct or incorrect. We're just talking about, when we're talking about disparate treatment, the definition that is supplied for race under disparate treatment, disparate impact, like employment, equal opportunity employment, is going to be the definition of how one person looks. Like, that's really what it's going to break down to.
Yeah.
So whether it's real or not is irrelevant for the purposes of discussing the law.
Yeah, I'm screen sharing this because somebody in the chat wanted to again challenge Nate, the lawyer, again, and say, hey, Oregon doesn't prove for privacy. So here's the Oregon voter registration card, just so we can all see. When you scroll down to this part right here, you must provide your valid blah, 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 right? And it tells you all the acceptable. So yes, even in Oregon, if you're voting for the first time in a federal election, you got to provide valid ID, either photo ID or one of these acceptable IDs, voter identification card, paycheck stub, etc. Even though most of their elections are done through the mail, you still in Oregon, because of the federal law, have to provide ID. So yes. So, go check it out. This is all publicly available information. All
right. So what is up, Viva Frei? What's going on?
In general?
What's standing out to you? You've done a couple rants. What's going on?
So Maxime Bernier, the leader of the PPC, is doing what he's calling a Mad Max tour of Canada for the People's Party of Canada. And he's headed off to Manitoba. And Manitoba apparently now has an intra-provincial, between provinces in Canada, quarantine. And so if you arrive from anywhere else in Canada to Manitoba, and I think it might be the same elsewhere, you got to quarantine for 2 weeks. Maxime Bernier, who's doing a political tour, political rallies in Manitoba, was told by their CHO or whatever, the health officer, that he's got to quarantine for 2 weeks. And he says in a tweet, he's not doing it and is expecting problems, seeing how things have gone in Nova Scotia and Alberta, and we'll see if Manitoba is the same way. So we've fallen off the deepest part of the deep end here when we are now talking about quarantine, and it's going to lead to interprovincial vaccine passports in Canada, which is it's over the top, and people have just lost their collective minds, in my humble opinion. And that's what's going on in Canada now. And then you have a conservative.
Wait, that reminds me of something. I have a friend, Tyson Franklin, in Australia, and mid quarantine or whatever, I was like, "How is it affecting you?" He said, "Well, we just learned that our provincial governments actually do have power, And he said, it turned everybody's view upside down because they always thought that they have different provinces, I guess, like Canada. It's like their states. And everybody was like, oh, that's nothing more than a figurehead. Somebody who's voted in, all that. And he said that all of a sudden they were shut down from each other. So he couldn't see his grandkid, everything else. And the people came to a realization that, oh, it actually does matter whom you vote for. It's in an election. They really do have power.
Well, I mean, they have power. I mean, I think it's fundamentally unconstitutional. It would be no more unconstitutional than restricting interstate travel in the US, except, man, they do it. Canadians don't seem to take them to court like the day after tomorrow. And when they do, the courts don't seem to say much about it. There's been a border set up between a blockade or check line between Ontario and Quebec, where people from Ontario, non-essential travel has been restricted, where you have police on the borders. And the courts are doing nothing about it and seem relatively content until it affects them in a negative way. But then, by then it's well too late.
What, Stanley Cup? No.
Oh, no. Well, for the Stanley Cup, they make an exemption, for the 2-week quarantine when you travel internationally. The government got together and passed an exemption for NHL teams so they can cross the border without any quarantine. But the lowly hoi polloi have to do it, have to pay for it. And, and it deters any form of travel for the citizenry, but they make an exception for the hockey players, which shows you one of two things. Either you get exceptions based on politics, or the rule itself was rubbish to begin with, and they can find an exception when they need to. It's not, I see some people in the chat asking when the Canadian border is going to open up. It's supposed to open up sooner than later. Within, I think they were talking about removing the restriction in the coming days, but
I thought it was July 2nd.
July 2nd. So, soon enough. But even then, and apparently even then, even fully vaccinated people are going to have to still quarantine when you cross the border, which might cause some people to ask the question, why get vaccinated if that's the angle? Or is the vaccine good if I still have to quarantine for 2 weeks, even after having done it and tested negative? It's over the top to a point of comedy, except it's actually tragic. And as they say, the line between comedy and tragedy is a question of perspective. I just made that up, and I think I'm coining it, if it doesn't already exist.
Well, I've always heard the comedy is tragedy plus time, and that definitely works.
Mine is better.
Did you? So on that vein of the vaccinations and then still requiring quarantining, did you see the first fully vaccinated cruise ship took off and then had people test positive?
Yeah, but I mean, I heard about it. The first thing that Nick, I'm going to talk about it with Robert. I didn't hear that the CDC came to an agreement with the travel industry or the cruise line industry. So I'm curious. They obviously settled in mediation, but I'm curious about the testing. The two people who tested positive. What was the test that they were using? What's the threshold? What's the standard? And what was the test for? Was it active, inactive, contagious, not contagious? Like, I need details. And yeah, we need to see what's going to happen. But what happened with the resolution? That happened quietly.
But one thing also about testing, though, like if you just got infected, let's say today, right, and somebody tests you today, it's going to come up negative, right? So there's like an incubation period too. So it could have been one of those things where they could have tested negative right before they got on and just tested positive. So.
Well, there are problems with the PCR tests, chat's pointing out, and I have heard that, like the person who invented them or studied them actually is saying they're using them wrong or inappropriately. But on the same path, because I do think it's been pointed out to me, everything's suddenly opening up. Not that much has necessarily changed. And it's like, it's arbitrary time. Let's get moving. And I find it ironic because DC, I think, just opened up. And remember, everybody's accusing Trump and the Republicans of trying to kill people because they didn't care about anything but the economy. And the same argument could be sent back. What are your feelings, though, on vaccine cards? Because I really have issues about show me your papers.
Are we talking about voter ID law still, or something?
Vaccine passport. Hey, you want to talk about the cognitive dissonance, the mutually incompatible arguments that voter ID law is racist, but somehow a vaccine passport is not racist, especially knowing the statistics and the demographics of who is reluctant to get vaccinated. The vaccine passport is an affront. it's an affront, I would think, in general, but everyone's going to say, well, you have certain vaccines that are required for daycare, et cetera. I'll say for this particular context, when you're dealing with an emergency authorization use, young vaccine, under the circumstances, I think the vaccine passport is absolutely invasive. And if you want to talk arguably racist or discriminatory, arguably racist and discriminatory. But no, because there are people who are reluctant for historical reasons. There are people who are reluctant for religious reasons. There are people who are reluctant for personal reasons. There are people who can't get it for physical reasons. And so what you're going to penalize someone who, say, had GBS, who can't get vaccinated, or who has another ailment that can't get vaccinated, and you're going to penalize them under these circumstances. We're not dealing with the bubonic plague. It's like for me, it's unconstitutionally unjustifiable. But I've been wrong a whole lot on how far this can go.
I got a question on that. What about a company, let's say, because I think this is some sneaky shit. Mm-hmm. What about a company that says, for example, we're putting in a vaccine card voluntary program, and you don't have to show one, but if you don't, you wear a mask. Now, isn't that in essence saying either you show the card or you didn't get it? And it's kind of trapping people to out themselves? Or am I misinterpreting the effects? And we can argue intent, but I'd say the effects are kind of causing people to out themselves, right?
Well, because I don't know. It's weird because we already do have vaccine passports. If I can just be candid, I have to do one for my kids every year to go to school, right? I got to show a vaccine passport. Here's them vaccinated so they can go to school. If I don't show that vaccine passport, they don't go to school. So now can you add COVID vaccine to that list? Now, I've just been arguing with my kids' school that you can't force me to get something that's under emergency use authorization to force my kid to take it. That ain't going to happen, right? I should be able to choose. Well, it's not even approved by the FDA, yeah. And they tell you can't force people to use something that's not approved by the FDA. So now you're going to tell me I have to get something that's not approved by the FDA.
But no, Nate, you don't have to. You don't have to. But if you don't, your kid's got to wear a face mask in high school, or your kid's got to wear a face mask in elementary school, or if you don't, they have to socially distance. For people not to be offended, you just have to be overwhelmed and sort of overcome by the fear that has been drilled into us over the last year and a half. We're talking about herd immunity. If you get to herd immunity in any event, and I'm speaking well beyond my knowledge. I hear the words. We need to get to herd immunity so we can get back to normal. Then you don't need the vaccine passports, and then it's really seems punitive and to humiliate and to pressure than it does to actually solve any real problem. But hold on. But
Viva, just for instance, we're at herd immunity with mumps, measles, and rubella, right? We're at herd immunity, but every year my kids still got to prove that they got those shots, right? So I don't want to give people the expectation that as soon as we get herd immunity, it's going to be all over. I think herd immunity can just be the next step in us saying, well, we still want to see this proof. Because for all these other vaccines, for instance, we're at herd immunity and they still force us to go and prove that our kids were vaccinated, even though herd immunity has been gotten.
True, but we're talking about cumulative factors and not any one that is determinate on its own. So herd immunity on its own is not the issue, but it is a relevant factor to consider. But herd immunity coupled with the risks of this particular virus and the novelty of this particular vaccine, we're not talking about measles vaccine, which has been around 80 years?
Yeah, something 80 years, something like that.
So we're not talking about something with a proven track record that could then be subject to those types of requirements.
Yeah, so I agree.
Cumulative factors, but it's
right.
No, it's going to be an interesting discussion because if they actually, I saw someone in the chat said there's going to be interprovincial travel if you've been vaccinated. I mean, people have forgotten we have a constitution in Canada. We may not respect it as much as you guys do in the States. We have a constitution.
Don't be too hasty. Don't be too hasty.
We're almost there.
We respect it on our end. The Second Amendment would like to hear your location.
Well,
let me just say this about the vaccine cards for schools is I fully disagree with them as well. And I am not an anti-vaxxer in general. Me, my kids, my wife, we all are relatively vaccinated on the big things. And I have no problem with that. I do have problems with a couple vaccines. I have problems with the flu vaccine, mainly because every time I take it, I get sick. And the best part is that people tell me that doesn't happen. I'm like, every time I take it, I get sick.
Yeah, I get sick too.
Virus. It can't do that. It's dead. It's dead.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't care if I'm getting the flu. I just know that anecdotally, every time I take it, I get sick. So I don't want to take it. But the other, vaccines I have a problem with are ones that are not approved by the FDA and where the government has specifically limited liability for the makers. And then they have become basically de facto mandatory. Once you do all those things, I immediately go, okay, wait, I'm not really into this. I may be into it at some point, but right now I'm not. Oh, and also when the companies that make it suddenly go, well, it looks like you're going to need a booster maybe every 6 months, maybe every year, because they know that it's going to be a required sort of thing. And that if I can't pay it, the government will. So they're able to just go ahead and use the situation in fear to set up a system where they're going to have to keep shelling out money to a company that directly benefits from it. I mean, all of that combined makes me particularly wary of those types of situations, I'll say. But I think the vaccine card thing for school is ridiculous. I think if you don't want to risk that someone else at the school is going to not have a vaccine or whatever, then you don't send your kids to school. You go to private school that has their own requirements, or you go to a public or you do homeschooling or whatever. Because the reality is if your kid is vaccinated, it really doesn't matter if another kid is vaccinated.
It shouldn't.
Right.
They're saying it still might, because you can have breakthrough cases, you can have carriers and community. They're saying it might, in which case, that's
the sun might explode tomorrow. We might be hit by a meteor. I mean, anything's possible. Absolutely.
But we do have like the actual effects of something like this happening here in New York, in the Hasidic Jew community in Williamsburg, in right over the Brooklyn Bridge. They had the religious. Well, there wasn't a religious exemption, but they weren't getting their kids vaccinated, and we had I think mumps. What was it, mumps or one of those things that everybody's vaccinated for? There was an outbreak. Because so many people. It's like after you get below a certain level, then you had the issue of people who weren't vaccinated, like Viva was saying, because of medical reasons or some other reasons where, they couldn't get the vaccine. They were now exposed to this illness that generally is gone. So, I think there are arguments on both sides. I understand. I forget, what was the last one? The one that's like for the sexually transmitted disease.
HPV.
The HPV vaccine. Don't forget the Republican governor of Texas, Rick Perry. Remember, he signed the law to force students in Texas to get that vaccine as part of that cocktail. So this isn't, I understand COVID may be having political
ambitions quickly crumble too.
Yeah,
just to point out,
but he was a Republican, and that was a Republican legislature, a Republican governor. They all signed that into law, and everybody hated him for it. But I think it's less. I think the issue of vaccination is less political. I think when you talk about COVID, that's when you get the political mess to it. But the thing is, a lot of people have been living with these rules for their whole life, and never really seen it applied.
Let's talk about the vaccine court, because if the companies had actual liability, I'll be the first one to line up.
It would eliminate an argument, which is if it's safe and effective, there's no need for liability. Now, and everyone says, well, what was one of the arguments was that it would kill production, manufacturing, if they were held liable. No, because in all other medical manufacturing and with all other medicines, there's no liability. I think its only exception is for vaccines. And so you want to eliminate an argument and instill confidence. That's the way you do it. What I found totally amazing is that I've had this discussion with people where back in the day, they referred to anti-vaxxers when they created the term. It was to refer to people who call it, I won't even qualify, who refused or objected to vaccines with a decades of
the world.
Well, no, I don't say judgmentally. I'm just saying they were objecting to vaccines which had a track record of safety on the basis of certain concerns, which have since, from what I understand, have been debunked. Now, the like with all arguments, the bastardizing of language has come to the point now where if you have a problem with any vaccine, people can call you an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah.
I'm vaccinated. I ask questions about chickenpox. My kids got vaccinated for chickenpox, and I asked the doctor, like, why would we vaccinate against chickenpox? And the explanation I was given is, if they get them, there's a risk of flesh-eating virus or infections from when you scratch the sores. It's like, okay, I don't know what the risks are with the vaccine. I presume it's been around for long enough, so the risks are not worth raising an issue over. I got shingles the last time I went to visit Nate in New York.
And you didn't get it from me. You didn't get it from me.
I got it from my internal stress levels. But like, even having gotten it, I would ask a question before getting the shingles vaccine, just because, like, what's worse, the risk of getting it and then living with it versus getting the vaccine. Other ones, if I get bit by a raccoon, I'm running out to get a rabies vaccine. I don't care what the risks are there. I have my issues. But with this, a new vaccine, EUA, non-FDA approved, immunity for the manufacturer, and people want to dare call anybody who asks questions an anti-vaxxer, that is when we've abused the words to the point where they no longer have the intended meaning.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. Very good points.
This is what you get when you find a lawyer who cannot hand-to-hand combat kill a raccoon. Certain lawyers on this panel may have significant experience. I would never fear a raccoon or getting bit. I wouldn't even have to consider it because I know personally that I can murder a raccoon in melee combat.
I think if there's any vets in the chat, they can correct me. I'm fairly certain rabies is potentially airborne. So even if you didn't get bit by the raccoon, if you hit one with your car and demolished it enough on your ventilation and it blew particles into your car, you don't need to get bit. I had a squirrel scratch my hand during one of my squirrel videos. I spent the next 3 days thinking I'm going to die of rabies. I'm going to be that one idiot that dies from there has never been a case of rabies communicated from a squirrel to a human because squirrels typically don't get it. But I was going to be that one guy. I did not get the rabies vaccine then because squirrels don't carry. But you don't need to get bit or scratched.
No, I found an article. I shared this with Allison last week, and this does kind of tie into it. Maine has been talking about how 8 vaccinated residents died with COVID-19. Now, what's interesting about the article, though, is, and I was trying to find a copy of it. They were talking about how some of them, it was end of life care. Now, one question: why in God's name would you be giving a COVID vaccine as part of end of life care? Unless you really got to make sure you get your doses out there. I mean, I really do wonder about that. It's like, oh, you're going to die anyway, but it won't be COVID this week.
Hold on,
especially I've had Dr. Drew come on and confirm that a high number of people, when they take the COVID vaccine, get sick. Now, I'm not, it's not saying that they're getting sick, blah, blah, blah. He's saying this is your system. It's fighting it, to build up the immunity, blah, blah, blah. So now let's take somebody who is ultimately dying, they're in hospice care or whatever it is, and let's make their system fight something. Does this make any sense, or am I just goofy?
No, Eric, that doesn't make any sense.
If anybody saw me smiling or laughing, it was not at what Eric was saying. It was at the chat that says, I've been hooking up with a raccoon. Do I need to get tested? Asking for a friend. Just so no one thinks I was laughing at what Eric said. I wasn't even listening at that point. So,
the real bamboo guy. We know who you are. We know who you are, bamboo guy.
listen to Viva over here. It's like, I wasn't laughing at old dead people. I was laughing at old dead people. I'm owning it.
Someone's going to pull this clip and say, Mr. Prime Minister Viva, were you laughing? And Eric was talking about, no, I was laughing at the sex with the raccoon joke.
Oh my god!
What you see what's happening? There's this guy in the chat, and he's talking about having sex with raccoons. I couldn't contain myself.
The chat.
While we're angering the algorithm, let's talk about, and I know you did a video on it. How about the sweet relationship between Fauci and Zuckerberg, and how Instagram is removing anti-Fauci memes, and who owns Oh wait, that's right, Zuckerberg.
Facebook.
I live in a community of scientists, not myself, and not to pull the Ben Shapiro, but I've heard cases of people who are just talking about vitamin D, not as even in the context of homeopathic remedies, who are having articles on vitamin D censored and removed, and they can't post their research on Instagram. It's Orwellian. We've gotten there. The only question is, why isn't it upsetting people more? But then the other question is, what can people even do at this point? other than shut these social media giants off. But nobody wants to do that.
I haven't heard this one.
Yeah, because it's I don't know. It's just so weird because you would suspect Facebook if I'm saying things and Facebook is a place you're supposed to want to be able to give your opinions, and now they're making it so you can only give the right opinion, and that changes the dynamic of the whole of Twitter or Facebook. And people criticizing Fauci should be, I assumed it would be okay, but it's something that I think we now have to think about because that Section 230 immunity, there's a cost, and right now we're giving away for free.
Actor. State government actor at this point.
It almost is getting to that point where you got this quasi government actor, but it's a little more tenuous than that.
Well, so I'm going to discuss it with Robert on Sunday, but this is a question I had for Nate and Nick. State actor argument, I would imagine, still has to be or is limited contextually. So it's not because Facebook might have coordinated with a state actor on one issue that the entire platform as a whole becomes a state actor. Like I would imagine there's a separation of sorts.
Yeah, correct.
It's a voluntary, patriotic thing, and he can duck under that. It's like, well, no, I wasn't told what to do. I volunteered to do stuff.
Wasn't told what to do. That's the wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, a lot of people bring up the state actor theory or quasi government actor theory, and it's wonderful, except when you start researching like just what is required to get to a quasi government actor. It has nothing to do with funding or anything like that. And I believe we've even got case law suggesting that private institutions that are 99% public funded are still fully private institutions, and are not state actors in that way as well. So
it sounds like goes back to the old racism thing about one drop.
Well, and to be fair, I'm pretty sure that's where those cases actually come from. It was cases on like private school segregation and stuff like that, where even though these private schools were receiving public funds in some significant amounts, they were still determined to be private entities, and so they were allowed to engage in racial segregation for a period of time after Brown versus Board. But but that's where that quasi government actor theory was shut down in some areas. So what you really need for that is you need specific direction from the government, and then the state action has to be related to the government activity that's being requested. So if the government hires you, like the cyber ninjas may be actually a state actor. So if cyber ninjas down in Arizona doing the audit were to engage in certain practices that would be prohibitive of, violative of people's rights, they may be a quasi government actor at that point because they're hired by the government to do a thing that is typically done by the government, which is counting votes and conducting an audit of an election.
Well, I know in criminal law, this comes up a lot when, back in the day, police, if a police officer searches your stuff, they would need a warrant or some type of reasonable justification to, satisfy the constitutional requirements. So in some jurisdictions, what police would do is hire, like private investigators or even just, people, hey, go look in that bag and tell me, and I'll give you some cash to look in that bag. So the government the courts come forward and says, well, if you're doing it at the direction of the government, you can't get around it. That person becomes also an agent of the government because you're getting paid, you're getting this. And so it really depends on whether the person is being directed by the government. So in some of the situations, just by getting funding, like for instance, government gives, and I know the government gives funding to churches to give meals out to people, but no one will say the church is a government actor because they give them the full, they don't tell them what to do with, it's just you do what you want to do with it. But if they were to then, if they were direct, it's a way that in the direction of what, if the contingencies on with the money. So it's
like a commandeering type argument, but on the basis of the what was someone? Oh, it was the lawsuit that I mentioned in the video. Actually, was I never heard of it, but the public broadcasting had fired some employees for a broadcast, and they argued that it's a state actor because they're publicly funded. And 5-4, the court said no. It's just interesting that it was the dissenting opinions that seem to be potentially binding now on Facebook, at the very least, as relates to this one issue. And one person in the chat, Mandalore Wise, asked, and which is what I think would be the limitation, even if Facebook would be recognized to be a state actor, I imagine it would only be on the COVID-related posts where they would then not be able to censor on viewpoint discrimination on that. But as far as the platform goes, the court would, in theory, probably dissect or cut away that section from the rest of the business. American lawyers?
That's a good question.
Hold on, ask it again.
If even if they recognize Facebook as a state actor on the one issue of Fauci coverage, they could separate that from the rest of Facebook business.
Yeah, it would only be limited to that particular state act, to that particular actor and what they're doing. Yeah, it wouldn't be the full company.
But someone in the chat asked what I thought of Doug Ford. Guys, you may not know about this, but in Canada, we have a constitution and it guarantees fundamental rights. Except there's a notwithstanding clause in our constitution that says you have these rights, but the government can violate those rights if they pass a specific law that specifically says they're violating those rights. And if they do that, it's called the notwithstanding clause. It can last for up to 5 years, renewable every 5 years. And it can only violate legal, I forget which rights exactly, but like search and seizure, right to liberty. It can violate your fundamental rights, but not your voting rights or interprovincial travel, whatever. And the governments now have what I call, they've gotten the taste of dictatorship. Now they're just reflexively going to use this notwithstanding clause. In Quebec, they're using it for some language laws they're passing. In Ontario, Doug Ford wants to use it for some advertising, election advertising. Hey, and I called in the radio station the other day, or did I? But I said, like, what do you think was going to happen? We've got a year. Our government has been doing whatever they want in total defiance of our constitutional rights. They're going to invoke this notwithstanding clause because what's the big deal? But now you guys are upset when it relates to ads and language laws, but you weren't upset when it related to whether you could leave your house or not. Anyway, so that's what I think about that Canadian stuff. You guys, you seem luckier in the States, but I do see that your constitution is under attack. Ours just seems to have been abandoned.
Yeah, there are no absolutes for these rights.
There are more guidelines than rules.
No, but every single right that we have here in the United States too is subject to strict scrutiny. Nick, Second Amendment and all that stuff. So it's just the highest level. So the government, can violate those rights, but they just have to have a goddamn good excuse to violate those rights. That's supposedly supposed to be. So.
That's the best strict scrutiny. A goddamn good excuse.
that's what it's supposed to be. Karamatsu, right? What was Karamatsu? Yeah. Their good excuse was Japan's bombing us, right? So that was good enough for the Supreme Court then. So
it is, we've been talking about it for a long time. It is amazing to see the courts, more so in Canada than the US, but get swept up in the frenzy where I hope in 20, 30 years time, they're going to say there was a judge in Quebec that said being held under curfew was not a serious enough violation of your civil rights to warrant court intervention. I hope. But we may never get there.
These are the same judges, though, that want people to wear a mask in the courtroom. And I think Barnes pointed that out. They'd be shown as hypocrites because they want the same things. I mean, they want people to stay home so they don't have to walk near them.
I don't think he meant it in the hypocritical sense. He just meant it in the legal sense. You're asking a judge who is currently abiding by these rules and regulations to overturn them. It's counterintuitive and then potentially hypocritical as well.
Yeah. But the judge in Kentucky did it. He basically said every COVID order by Andy Beshear was unconstitutional. Now he did it, and I don't think there's any mistaking what happened here. He did it with 2 days left. 2 days left. All of the Kentucky restrictions were dropping today, and on Wednesday he signed an injunction against all of them that would go into effect on Thursday. So it was 1 day earlier, but he did say these are all unconstitutional, and that ruling then stands in Kentucky law for the next time they try and do something similar. So that's good, and I think we need it. I think we need more of it, but at the same time, it is a little bit of a Pyrrhic victory on this stuff.
What about strict scrutiny again? Strict scrutiny is narrowly tailored and narrowly.
You have to have a compelling government interest,
and it's got to be narrowly tailored. So that's what goddamn good excuse means.
Yeah.
Well, narrowly tailored, and we have similar criteria in Canada. We don't, different terminology, but damn good reason. It's got to be limited, and the invasion has got to be minimal. But we had a federal court judge.
Limited. That's the problem you're having, right? They just keep moving the goalposts.
Well, and what's the goddamn good reason? Like in Nova Scotia, they issued an injunction to prevent public protest against the lockdown measures on the basis that it would prospectively be such a big risk to violate these public health orders that they issued an injunction enjoining the people from holding the protest. I mean, in the federal court, the judge approved of these quarantine hotels on the basis that there's a risk that people traveling from abroad who test negative might test positive within 14 days of arrival. And he cited as one example an outbreak that occurred at a long-term healthcare facility because someone came back, did their 2-week quarantine with someone who tested positive. Sorry, the other way around. Someone came back, tested negative, did their 2-week quarantine at home with a roommate who worked in healthcare. By whatever fluke, they tested positive. The healthcare worker took it to the long-term healthcare facility, and 71 people died in a mass outbreak. I don't know the details of that story. It was in Barrie, Ontario, but that couldn't recur anymore because healthcare people are not allowed living with someone who's in quarantine. So couldn't happen again. But these infinitesimal risks are deemed to be the damn good reason. It's at the very least there seems to be some pushback in the States.
Quick, someone tell a raccoon sex joke so Viva laughs at the outbreak.
No, this outbreak. And then incidentally, anyone wants to get shocked, there was a report in Canada that showed, like, I forget the number, the exact percentage, but a significant, not an insignificant percent, like 20 some odd percent of people in old-term healthcare facilities, long-term healthcare facilities, died of neglect and dehydration, and not from COVID. Like, it was a military report. So it's just nuts. You don't know what's going on, and you don't know where the outbreaks are coming from. You don't know what's exacerbating them. But you got a judge saying because this one guy in quarantine tested positive 2 weeks later, co-roommated with someone who worked in healthcare, then these quarantine hotels are justified. It's a stretch for me.
What do you guys think about the Methodist Hospital down in Houston, which I think it's based in Houston, but they've mandated that every worker get the vaccine. And then I think there's like 180 something workers who have not gotten the vaccine yet. They've all been suspended, and 100 of them have sued to go ahead and get to say that they can't be forced to take the vaccine as a condition of work. Have you guys been following this at all?
I've heard of it. I haven't followed it though.
Yeah.
No,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say we have people asking the same questions in Canada, but it's, each province has different rules. So it's,
yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nate.
No, I'm just saying my opinion. It's, I think it's difficult to force people to take a vaccine that hasn't been approved by the FDA. That's like, I don't see how you get past that fact of reality. You know what I'm saying? Even though they have mass people taking it and they say it's safe, and they say if it's safe, then why not have the FDA approve it? And then the argument changes. But if you're talking about an emergency use authorization that's not approved by the FDA, I don't see how you can force people to take it. I just don't.
Now, what about for a private employer though? Because like a private employer says get the jab, then or you peacefully have to resign. You can't work.
I don't. What I would say is I don't think a private employer can force me to take something that's not FDA approved, right? So even if there's a drug out there that's not FDA approved, I can say I don't want to take that. And if they make it a condition of my employment, then I think I may have an employment law issue. You're forcing me to take something that's not approved by the government for use, not officially approved, but it's just emergency use authorization. How do I know it's safe?
Biggest flex on earth, by the way, super chatting while you're on the stream. We've talked about that. By the case law seems to be FDA approved, can be mandatory by federal employers, but non-FDA cannot. So the law is there. Hey, but maybe it's a goddamn good excuse this time. Now they're going to
well, this
one using that. You guys are going to be using that for a long time. Huh?
The question is, how do they know? How do they ask?
Yeah, the
HIPAA, they can't. Who was it? HIPAA, they can't share, and ADA, they can't ask. So how would they?
Don't ask, don't share. It's
what do you mean?
We don't.
I think they can. Your employer can absolutely ask if you've
of course
had a vaccine. There's I don't see why an employer would not be able to do that.
Yeah, and they couldn't because of ADA. Because
of course, they can ask.
That's why the CNN letter had written in like essentially a "don't ask, don't tell" section that Allison and he covered.
I mean, that might be a legal theory, but I'd be very surprised because employers can ask you all kinds of medical information questions, for example, a drug test.
Yeah.
They can do a drug test to make sure you're not taking methamphetamines.
They can make you go through a full health screening. Just look at the NBA. That's how Magic Johnson got caught with HIV. They made him go through a full health screening so they can insure him. Now I know they've said that your health screening can't do the genetic profiles now. Somebody may have the genetic for cancer, but you can do a full health screening before you get a job. That's perfectly okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what Barnes is referring to specifically because I haven't.
Well, maybe because you're already working there. Maybe they can't if you're already working there.
I'm not sure about the no asking stuff. I just know that it was the distinction that we had discussed was between FDA approved for federal employees versus non-FDA approved. But but you got people saying they can't ask you. I don't know how it works. But then the question becomes, if they require you to, can the employer be held liable if there's a negative or adverse reaction? At least that's some of the questions we're asking up in Canada.
Real quick on HIPAA, HIPAA is one of the most commonly misunderstood laws that's most frequently cited. HIPAA means that people who are covered under HIPAA, and I don't mean you, I mean the
doctors and healthcare facilities.
Right. You typically have to have someone with access to protected health information, and it's not everybody with access to protected health information. It's a certain group of people with access to protected health information are not allowed to disclose that protected health information to someone else without your consent. All of them can ask you or even require you to provide that information. That is not something that HIPAA stops or prevents or covers. And in fact, the sharing of your medical information by non-covered entities is not covered by HIPAA either. HIPAA is not the savior everyone thinks it is on COVID. It's not the savior for anybody on COVID, actually.
But one thing I do think HIPAA will cover is if you do give your employer does have this personal, identifiable, confidential healthcare information, then they'll be covered in the HIPAA because they can't release it to third parties. So that's the way it would work.
They can deal with HR in a corporate environment.
Yes, correct.
And it was very much a consideration in that.
Yeah. They can take in the information. They can't give it out without your consent.
Does anybody know if Doug Frei just put up a chat that says at least Pfizer and Moderna have applied for FDA approval? Is it not 3 to 4 years before they can get FDA approval for the safety verification? Does anybody know that?
I don't remember what the numbers are.
Okay, I thought it was a few years before it could get FDA approval, precisely because they have to verify the long-term efficacy and safety. You want to switch gears and go to Tanner Cross? We go from Second to First Amendment issues. Have you guys been following that case?
Sure, I haven't followed it at all. So,
what is it? Cross, the physical education teacher at the County School Board. So it's in that case where he got fired for certain comments he made on transgenderism, and if you read the mainstream media, they lead you to believe that he actively refused to properly gender a student, whereas the reality is that the school board called a school board meeting to get public consultation on policy issues. He comes in as a citizen to express his opinion, says he won't gender students against the biological sex because it's against his religion, etc. philosophically. And then he gets put on paid administrative leave within 48 hours, barred from accessing the premises, any school grounds, and he sued and he won his injunction, his provisional injunction and TRO. And the judge was not.
County. Well, two things. Number one, was this a public school or was this a private school?
My understanding is it's public school board.
All right. So everyone knows if you're a public employee, the Supreme Court has come down and say if you're a cop, firefighter, or public teacher, you can't be fired after a certain time without due process. So generally, the public unions, like for police officers, they'll in their collective bargaining agreement, they'll waive that for the first year, and they'll call it the probationary year. So in that first year, they can fire you for whatever. But then after that year, your rights kick in under the Constitution. So if this particular case,
he had been there for 3 years.
Yeah. So in this particular case, this teacher, you can't just remove him like that. You have to have good cause, and then you have to go through due process. In other words, he has to have notice, a hearing, and so forth to show what he did was so egregious. Now, there are certain things that you can do, obviously criminal, that can get you removed immediately, but something like this generally would take more time. So that's just the law, the background of the law. About it.
It's very significant. The county is so bad, their school board is so bad, they had to censor one of their own people. They're full up on CRT. I mean, they're trying to make it an agenda. The parents are in war or at war with Loudoun County. They doxed parents. I mean, this school board, this is only one of numerous issues. They're a gift who keeps on giving. Nick, you should have stuff on them.
I do. I just released a video yesterday about the Chinese mom who came in and basically said that Loudoun County's critical race theory reminds her of growing up under Mao. Very specifically talks about how in Maoist China, the distinction was not race, it was class, but it was the same thing, turning kids against each other, turning kids against parents, turning kids against teachers. That was some good stuff coming from her. But I want to talk about real quick, going back to the teacher. That is why the cop who donated to Kyle Rittenhouse, right? It's the same justification why he shouldn't be fired either for making a donation to Kyle Rittenhouse, even though he used his police officer email address on the donation site. And so many people,
which is very significant because it's a hack. He didn't go out and march and say, I'm donating to Kyle Rittenhouse. His stuff is hacked. That's a big difference.
Even if he did march, even if he did go out and do that, it's still protected speech. The thing that people don't seem to understand, and this is going off of what Nate was saying, is that your constitutional protections kick in. And so with Tanner Cross, they had a really nice breakdown by the judge that said, was he acting in his official capacity? Well, no. This is he's a gym teacher and he's speaking at a school related activity. However, he's speaking as a private citizen at an open public meeting, giving his opinion on school board issues. So he wasn't afforded any special leverage or time or anything else by the nature of him being a teacher. So he's clearly acting as a private citizen on a matter of public concern, in the same way that the guy who donated to Rittenhouse was doing this. I got so many people saying, well, he's a cop. He uses cop email address. Therefore, he's speaking in his official capacity. It's like, no, that is not the test. That's not even close to the test.
It's not even close to the fact, because the donation was anonymous. The comment was anonymous. The only reason they ever found out it came through him was because he used a hack. They were hacked and they found out he used his police email for the donation, but everything else was anonymous. So yeah, we could argue what would have been the case had he done it publicly, used his badge avatar and whatever. But the people don't even know the facts, nor do they appreciate the facts in this. I'm saying Loudoun, I think is the right way to pronounce it. I've been corrected.
Yeah.
The Loudoun County. This teacher was off hours, off premise, off site, waited in line like every other person. Judge noted this in his decision, and was speaking on an issue of public interest that they were summoned there to speak on. And because they get hit with the mob comments, they cater to it, and within 48 hours, paid administrative leave. And not just that, they send an email to everyone at that particular school, Leesbury School, I think, telling them, yeah, he's on administrative leave, as if that's the kick in the teeth when you're already on the ground, just to ruin whatever was left of his reputation in the minds of others. But reaction has been totally the other way around. People have rallied to his support.
This reminds me of what happened. Oh, go ahead with the story, because I'm saying that this reminds me of what happened in Georgia just recently with the cop that shot what's his name, Rayshard Brooks. Where they fired him, but then they found out that, hey, he has these constitutional rights, and they literally reinstated him and now put him on leave. They had to pay him a year's worth of back pay. So, it's sad, because you would suspect the left would be more protective of people's rights and process, but they're just not. They're just trying to fire these people, and we violated all his rights, so now we got to pay him a year's salary. It just doesn't make any sense.
Real quick, is the prosecution for Rayshard Brooks? Is that still going? I feel like I saw some news about it.
No, it is still going. Yeah. All right. So the news is that so this is what's happening now. It's a little complicated, but essentially Rayshard Brooks the police officers and the training staff there in the Atlanta Police Department have come out and said what he did was the right thing to do. We trained cops to do that. Somebody points a taser at you, you shoot them, period, right? So they have all this. So they fired him like 2 days later, but now the board has come back and said, well, listen, you guys didn't follow due process rights. And on top of that, his supervisors are saying he did the goddamn right thing. So why else? So you firing him so why are you firing him? You're firing him. His supervisor said he did the right thing. But he's obviously being indicted, but so you can't fire him. So they put him on administrative leave and now they're paying him the year's salary. But this is different than the George Floyd incident, because in George Floyd, all the cops and all the trainers were saying he did the wrong thing. But here, all the cops and all the trainers are saying he did the right thing. So the prosecutor now, who inherited the case because the other prosecutor was corrupt and he kicked them out. But the new prosecutor who doesn't want, they were trying to get a special prosecutor to prosecute the case. Yeah. And because they don't want to prosecute, because they know the case is a loser. It's looking down a motion to dismiss. So they were looking to try to get a special prosecutor, but the judge that came back and said, no, you have to prosecute this case because it's your office that started the prosecution. So now they're trying to decide, and it's a hell of a spot to be in. You're a liberal prosecutor with this cop that you can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that what he did was murder, because all the cops in the department are saying it wasn't murder, but you have everybody who's voting for you going to expect a prosecution. So what do you do? So that's why it's kind of teetering on this thing right now.
And they're gonna lose that case pretty heavily. When I watched it, all I could think was, I really didn't want anybody to die from this, but at the same time, he pointed a taser at an officer and fired it. I cannot countenance that not being a justified use of lethal force. If you went up to someone and tried to use a taser on them and they shot you, they would be justified.
No, Eric, you don't even know how bad it is. 2 weeks before this incident, the same DA charged the cops, right? The cops pointed a taser at people, and the DA said, you pointed a deadly weapon at these people and charged the cops with assault with a deadly weapon. But then when this guy points the taser at a cop, he's like, "Oh no, the guy was peaceful, and the cop, and the cop was unjustified." So it's all messed up down. It's all political. We know what's up.
What about the Kyrie Irving water bottle? Did you see that, where the guy threw the water bottle at Kyrie Irving in Boston, and he got tagged with assault with a deadly weapon?
I saw the video.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about deadly. Oh man, that's crazy. It's obviously assault, but assault with a deadly weapon, that's a little bit. Oh, yeah, you know what? It could be with a deadly, because I know we have that distinction here. Like a water bottle is not a deadly weapon, but if I throw it from the roof of my building at you, and then it becomes a deadly weapon because of the trajectory, So in some circumstances it's not, but in other circumstances, I don't know how that case is or what the law there is.
Or if it was frozen.
It's why it's why when you go to a stadium, they don't give you a cap on the water bottle anymore.
Okay.
One, the hope is that some of the water will spill while it's flying. The other is that when it hits, the impact will be reduced because the water will squirt out of the bottle. But
I thought of a good hack for that, but I'm not going to say it live.
But that'll be an interesting case, I think. If assuming it actually survives, I think that'd be one where it'd be like, let's get this out of here.
Yeah, it's assault, though, but assault.
Let's plea this down.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even count that. That's not even harm assault, because did the water bottle hit him?
No.
So it's not even harm assault. So it's scare assault. So
on the video, it doesn't look like it hits him. Someone said it grazed him, but I think he doesn't even react to the bottle like touching him. He reacts. It seems like after the bottle hits the ground, then everybody's kind of looking around for where the hell it came from. So
just so everybody understands, the distinction between is assault harm and assault fear. In most states, they call it assault harm battery, but in the Northeast, we just stupid with it. So for assault fear, you have to prove that the person was scared, got scared. That's assault fear. But in assault harm, you don't actually have to prove that the person intended to harm the person. So I know it's a little weird, but that's generally the way it works.
Nick, you're in Minnesota. Are you covering the lawsuit of the employees who were fired, or the lawyers who were fired from the partnership of their law firm for pro-Trump tweets? Have you heard about this story?
No.
What?
let me just see. It was I forget the name of the law firm. I'm trying to get a copy of the lawsuit, but it was called something in Scott. It's called the Scott is in the partnership of the firm, but apparently after the January 6th events, this partner at the firm went nuts when he saw that other partners or other employees of the firm had posted pro-Trump messages, and apparently he ordered one person to get fired. When she wouldn't fire the person, he fired that person, then fired 3 of the other people who happened to be partners with a 50% interest in the partnership. And I haven't. If anyone knows, there we go. What is it called? It's called something in Scott.
Wesley Scott, Kane and Scott law firm in St. Cloud.
Minnesota law firm.
Anyhow, so it's a video next channel later today.
That's 45 minutes from me. Look at this guy. I
had a reflex when I saw the picture, just because there's when they make fun of people on Twitter, there's a certain mouth formation, like the way someone smiles. And now I can't smile like that anymore in pictures because I can only hear the name that they call you. It's that ovular mouth, like anyhow. But yeah, this is the story. It's
so this must be a state law claim then.
Yeah,
I could probably go get the documents for you.
Kane and Scott. If you were to find the lawsuit, Nick, I would not say no to receiving it by DM.
Yeah, Minnesota sucks with our all the records of every lawsuit are kept online, but you can only access them through the courthouse system. You can access all of the records without getting to the documents online through the same filing system, but you have to have the special sign in at court admin to get the actual documents digitally, which is a pain. So, but all I have to do is just go down to the courthouse and grab them.
Well,
yeah,
it's not that.
But just so everybody understands, this is not a First Amendment claim, right? This is a state law claim. So yeah.
Contractual, and from what I understand, there's going to be big problems. Yeah, because they own 50% of the partnership, and there's going to be serious issues in dissolving that partnership.
Well, you can't fire 50% partners. So, they own half the business.
Yeah. What else? What are the other good ones that are on the back burners, gentlemen?
How much time do you guys think this guy Chauvin's going to get? I'm thinking 20 to 25. Aggravating factors.
He's got.
Go for it.
For aggravating factors, I think 30 years is well within the judge's intentions. He may try and scale it back for some reason, but I mean, a doubling of the sentence with 4 aggravating factors is not that would not be a shocker in any way. That would not be out of the ordinary or out of call. Now, I disagree with his rulings on the 4 aggravating factors, I think, because when I look at the intent of those aggravating factors, I don't think those were actually within the context of what was going on, like the presence of children. Well, there were kids on the street because the 17-year-old is the one who took the video of George Floyd. It's like, okay, the presence of children has nothing to do with like a random kid being happening to be there. The presence of children, why that's an aggravating factor is because, like, a dad might abuse a mom in front of a kid to punish the kid. That's the kind of aggravating factor we're talking about. So I disagree with some of the reasoning on the aggravating factors, but that said, my disagreement is irrelevant. Peter Cahill has found them, and they are within the text of the sentencing guidelines. Yeah, so I think 30 years. I think he's going to go for it.
No, well, the person, there was a 9-year-old there too. It's like, because there are 2 arguments for that. Number one, there was a 9-year-old. This wasn't a public place, a 9 and a 17-year-old. And on top of that, he was killed slowly over 8 minutes. No matter what the circumstances are, that's kind of, I don't know how you get over if the presence of children is an aggravating factor. Children are present as someone who got, who essentially died over 9 minutes. Well, and essentially been murdered. So.
Nate, first of all, Nate, I think you're right on the estimate. You said 20 to 25 years, and it sounds more than reasonable given what Cahill's already ordered. But the other issue, and I was listening to Nick on this, that one of the aggravating factors, the act was performed with particular cruelty. I mean, how do you reconcile that with the manslaughter charge, which means that there was a lack of intent to some extent? I mean, you could reconcile that with the felony murder, but not with the involuntary manslaughter. So, I mean, unless there's a way to do it conceptually.
Well, I'm thinking, well, generally, the lower requisite intent are kind of assumed in the higher. So if I find you guilty of premeditated murder, it's kind of also finding you guilty of reckless murder and, knowingly. It's like it kind of, the higher levels of murder also kind of assume those lower levels. So even though, he's found guilty of the manslaughter, but I've also find him guilty of third degree murder, they don't really conflict or, it's not like an either or, you know what I mean?
And I guess he could justify the particular cruelty of the act with the felony murder and not necessarily with the involuntary manslaughter.
Right. So, and he may just aggravate the sentence, because the weird thing is they have to sentence all three of the charges separately, and then they're all served concurrently. So he can apply the aggravating factors, I guess, in whatever way he wants to the individual sentences. He could aggravate just the felony murder if he wants to do that. Or he could in theory aggravate any of the other charges, and it wouldn't have any effect, depending on if the circumstances of the aggravating factors fit the requisite, the charge. But I think that since he's got 4 aggravating factors, I think we've seen enough of Peter Cahill to know that he's very conscious of the social impact of the case, and he's kind of indicated that throughout, which I think is probably in Eric Nelson's brief, talking about some of the problems that he has with the case. But I think that he's gonna, double the sentence, and the minimum, the sentence that Chauvin is facing is 15 years based on the guidelines already, and so doubling it to 30. Or taking a slight reduction of the double to 25 or whatever is, I think that's coming.
Yeah, but also, I also think it's worth noting too, those aggravating factors have to be found. They're questions of fact, right, for a jury to decide. So generally, they would go to the jury. Did any of these aggravating factors apply? Do you find them and in this case, it was just happened to be Judge Cahill who found them. So as a matter of law, these are now factual. These have been found beyond a reasonable doubt. Now we can say we can all agree that maybe some may have been overblown or we don't agree with them. But as a matter of law, these are now facts that have been that he's been found guilty. And if we're just applying them, then yes, I think doubling the sentence just makes sense. Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to convey earlier. My opinion doesn't really matter on what I think about the quality of his assessment in tune to the spirit of the sentencing guidelines. They are the sentencing guidelines. He's within the text of the sentencing guidelines, and he has found these things to be true beyond a reasonable doubt. So Chauvin's got a tough road. I'm planning on breaking down Eric Nelson's full memo, which came out on the 2nd, but it's 64 pages. And so I need to set up to do like 3 or 4 different videos breaking it down section by section, because it's just too big.
Is that the appeal or the sentencing memo? Because I read the sentencing memo.
His motion for mistrial memo.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Cahill aggravating factors is a bad indication as to the likelihood of success on the motion for a new trial. It seems. Not something a judge would do. No, if they had any intention of ordering a new trial.
Yeah, and he's indicated over and over. I mean, he's turned down several motions for a new trial, but the memo will be interesting because that will be the basis of the appeal that he filed. That they file immediately. Once Judge Cahill turns it down, they're going to be appealing that, and that'll give us a basis for the arguments.
He's gonna. I think he's gonna have a tough time for the appeal, because I think their best argument on appeal is the cumulative evidence that was presented. I think that is, if you're gonna hang your hat on something, you have that in spades, because you had way too many officers, way too many. You kept hammering the nail. But everything else, I think the judge, because it's a lot of judicial discretion. Like even with the aggravating factors, that's a matter of fact. So on appeal, that the appeals court can't even look at the way Judge Cahill, because he found those, as a matter of fact, sitting as a jury. And generally on appeal, you can't even review that unless it was legally inconsistent, which it wasn't. So it's going to be very, very difficult to see this really appealed successfully. The appeal is going to be fun for us to cover, but I think successfully it's just not there.
Yeah, I think he has some arguments under Shepard as well. with media influence on the medical examiner, with media influence on the prosecution. But I don't know that they're going to be sufficient. I don't know if they're going to be sufficient to overcome the conviction, because Shepard was a vastly different case. And while there was certainly media influence in Chauvin's case, the amount of influence between Chauvin and Shepard is pretty distinct, pretty different as well. Shepard had quite a bit more. I mean, you had the court having to take breaks because the media were so disruptive in the courtroom with the jury. It was a mess.
What is buck breaking?
Yeah, I was trying to get that in. Somebody's asking your thoughts on
Please
buck
don't make
breaking.
me the guy who has to explain this.
Well, I just Googled it. I saw a couple of memes, but
yeah. Tariq Nasheed did a documentary about Southern slaveholders violating male slaves. How do we that? I guess.
Okay. No, I did not see what was underneath this. Okay.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. It's controversial. The most interesting thing I've seen was they conclusively proved that the Southern slave owners who did this were not gay. That was an article I read. They proved that was not a gay thing at all. They were definitely straight. So.
Oh God, it makes me think of Norm Macdonald. Have you seen that? He's a deeply closeted gay man.
Norm is.
No, and that's the norm is. He goes on to Conan. I'm a deeply closeted gay man. So you're gay.
Why is this issue back in the news, Nick?
Because Tariq Nasheed did like a film about it, and everybody's the controversy is: do you have any proof that this is actually taking place? And was it taking place at a wide level and in the way that you were? It's a weird thing to me, that we still have people trying to prove that slavery was really bad and that slaveholders were bad to the slaves. I mean, I thought we figured that out already, but I don't know. But because Tariq Nasheed's a very controversial figure. He did this thing, and people are questioning the legitimacy of some of his claims.
Well, it's the shock and awe portion of it, right? Because a lot the longer time goes, but we all know there are horrible things. But I think the big issue is that people are trying to equate the lives that we live today and the America that we live today with that America. And there are vastly different places, vastly different laws. And don't get me wrong. I want to say plainly, we have problems in today's America. But this isn't the Jim Crow South, right? This isn't the black codes. This is our issues are disproportionate impact, for instance. Why do we have these particular anomalies in law? And we have these individual pieces, right? We have some cops who are out there who happen to be racist, and then we have some cops who and I'll say 99.9% of the cops are not. And how do we kind of figure that out? But I think the Democrats and I'll say the Republicans have their issues too, but I think for the Democrats, the basis of their political life is all about, making you feel that America is racist and they're fighting against the racists, and the racists happen to be the Republicans. And I think the Republicans have taken and say, hold on, if you can't, it's like if somebody comes to the argument, the first thing I say is you're a racist. Now we're talking the whole debate about you being whether you're a racist or not, and we never really get to the underlying issue. And that's why I think things like voter ID and things like even the U.S. women's soccer team, their gender claim, they came out and said they're discriminated, but nobody then goes into the details. And I think it's a way to demonize the other side and make it seem like you're on the side of right, and then nobody really looks at the details after that.
Well, it's a dirty fight. It's a dirty fight if you think about it, because you come up to somebody and say, you're a racist. No, I'm not. You're protesting a lot. People who protest, they must be racist.
Well, it is the all roads lead to racism, when that's what the people are looking for, is if you see color, you're racist, and if you don't see color, it's because of your privilege, you're racist. But it's a political divide and conquer. There's no question about it, and it's an easy one to do because it's so easy to call someone a racist, and it's so easy to feign moral superiority while doing it. And in Canada, we're not much better. You have the federal government now talking about federal loans for small businesses of black-owned businesses, setting aside the logistics of how you determine what percentage, et cetera, et cetera. You do it, and if you ask questions on it, it's just easy to call you a racist. If you say, we already have a federal program for small business loans, and if the banks aren't giving them based on racist reasons, why is this going to change anything? Or how is it going to change? Or why are you entrusting the banks with a new program when the banks are the problem in the first place? We already have laws and you already have things to deal with this, but it's easy to bring it up. Easy political points, easy to demonize any adversary who might disagree with it. And the old divide and conquer goes a long way in politics.
Speaking of which,
but the problem is that it's watering down the concept to where, like for instance, the cop that shot that young lady with the knife, it was about to stab the other girl who had the knife literally by her throat and about to stab her.
Yeah,
he saves a black young woman's life. He saved her life, and they called him a racist. He's a racist because he shot the black. It was like, what? No, that guy's obviously not racist. He saved the black. If he was racist, he would have let her get stabbed, right?
He would have shot. No, he would have shot all of them.
Yeah, he would have shot them both, right? It's just like
it's the litmus test. Is like, if you want to see racism, he killed a black kid. If you want to not see racism, you want to see heroism, he saved a black kid. But it's literally, that is the paradigm of the Rorschach test as to where you are ideologically in your analysis of events. If you want to find racism, it's going to be very easy to find it everywhere. But what I just can't get over, what was the other one? There was another policy that was just pure soft bigotry. I forget what it was. It wasn't the banning of the menthols because it.
You talking about Joe Biden? Joe Biden? You talking about the Joe Biden?
Well, no, it was another one that just came up recently. It'll come to me in a second, but it wasn't the banning of the menthols, which are predominantly, the cigarette of choice for minorities. I didn't know those stats, but it seems to be statistically true.
Oh, yeah.
But like the government has to come in and implement these policies under the guise of protecting minorities, where it effectively not trivializes, but degrades or what is it called when you remove agency from minorities, which is it's the exact opposite, but
infantilizing.
Infantilizing is the word I was looking for. But if anyone remembers the other thing where it was a policy decision, which basically was just pure soft bigotry by lower expectations. It wasn't the voter issue.
Voter ID laws too. I mean, you can add that to the pile.
Oh yeah, voter ID definitely. But I don't want to, because again, I don't want to lose nuance and trying to say we need more nuance. But there were policies and as an African American business owner myself, there were policies and there are still obstacles now in getting through those doors and trying to develop a business. But I would say that it's a lot easier now than it was before. But there are obviously hurdles. Like for instance, in Virginia, there's a famous Supreme Court case in which they did the same thing. They said, okay, this pot of money, we're going to put, I think, like 15% for Black-owned businesses. And it was challenged. And the Supreme Court said, well, if you're trying to fix some disproportionate issue from the past, because in the past, no Black person could get these loans. So now they said, okay, we're going to set certain amount of money to now make it even. So now we can have more Black people involved in this particular issue. Then I think that's okay. But again, it all depends on the reasons why. I don't think you should just give people checks. I think you should have a reason. It should be well thought out. It should be well reasoned. If you're saying, well, we want to at least make things even now to if we weren't giving black people loans in the past and we now want to have them more participate in the process a little bit more, I think that's okay. But I don't think it's okay to just say we're just going to give Black people money and not white people money. I think that's a tad too far.
Well, and it's counterproductive because all that does, and we've seen it within the last, 10 years, that exacerbates race relations when all that anybody sees is race and they see preferential treatment, even if it is to the justification is to remedy a historical injustice. You see COVID relief going to Black farmers and Black business owners and not restaurant owners and not others. That's not going to do anything to make race relations better. And you don't need to be a political scientist to know that. On that subject, by the way, Tom McDonald, everyone's seen his, if anyone has not gone down the rabbit hole on Tom McDonald, Eric, Tom McDonald did the snowflake video. Everybody's reacting to it. Sure. I think I've watched every single Tom McDonald rap video he's made, and they are phenomenal. I mean, they're phenomenal whether you agree with the message or not. And he did one video, which is called If I Was Black. And it's a whole, I mean, you may not agree with the message, but it's a whole reversal of the narrative from a white rapper doing it. It's if anybody hasn't done it, go down the Tom McDonald rabbit hole from snowflake to everything. It's amazing.
Fake woke, I think, is awesome.
Fake woke is awesome. There's can't remember the name.
Never watched any of them.
Nick, you'll be busy for an hour.
Yeah, check it out.
And the music is good. If you like, it's good. It's good Eminem-ish type rap music with I would arguably say better lyrics.
Okay,
is he actually paid? He paid for an NFT for an Eminem beat, and then did Dear Slim on Eminem's beat, and that's why he had it as produced by Eminem. So that was a crazy. He paid like $140,000 for the beat, and then released that song, Dear Slim, which is really cool because anybody who's watched Eminem, did you see that video, David?
Oh yeah,
He found the car, beat it out, repainted it himself. The amazing thing about Tom McDonald is he and his girlfriend Nova Rockefeller do 100% of everything, all merch, all videos, every single part of it. They do it together. She is like his director, and she does the filming, and it's amazing seeing somebody who's 100% independent artist like that.
Plus, you imagine just with the views he's getting on YouTube, he's got to be destroying it. But I mean, he's got a system and he's got it worked out. Someone said they don't like the music, but it's not for everybody. But it's rap music and it's got good beats, good lyrics. The videos are clearly lower budget, but you do what you can with the budget you have, and he does good work. He did a video, a rap song in which he explained his MO that he's does it all alone with his girlfriend, and how he's killing it, as they say in the industry.
It's funny too with the Dear Slim, he released like a short talking about it and how his sinuses couldn't get cleared for like 3 days because they tied like bricks to him to sink to the bottom of the pool, and he was like singing. They shot that underwater. I guess it took like a couple hours to get it there.
Oh yeah, no, there's a whole part of that video where he's actually underwater, and it's visually impressive.
Oh yeah, that was an amazing video. But yeah, I did react on it yesterday. So come by for the clicks. No.
I do want to say something. I do want to say something before
up.
Yes, I want to say something before we get out of here. The Carol Baskin interview was fantastic. And Nick, you are such a bad boy, because that super chat was fire. That was fire, brother. And I know it's funny, but it was fire. I was like, oh my! It's funny because it was so bad that she forgot what she was even saying. When you put it out there, she was like, I forgot what I was talking about. I was like, oh my God, Nick is just going. Nick.
I knew I may have stepped a little bit over because I got a message from Viva about 5 seconds after that chat popped up. I was like, uh-oh.
But everybody, go watch that interview. That interview was a fantastic interview. If you're watching this, go watch that interview. It's fantastic.
And not just that, I think we should all put collective pressure on the behavior panel to look that over, because when Nick put out that chat and before Eric brought up the second chat, you knew I suspected she was following the chat as it was going along. The second that chat came up, she lost what she was saying. She became flustered. And if the behavior panel wants to pick a moment to react to, that was it. But yeah, that was
I forgot what I was talking about because this stupid Nick Ricado put that crazy shit in the chat.
It can't be the first time someone says that to her. It can't be the first time she sees that. But she was flustered after that.
Yeah, you got her.
It was fun. That was my pleasure.
$20 well spent, Nick.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I did not bring up a particular case that's going on still, and it's one of the bigger free speech injustices I've seen lately, in my opinion. It's Lucas Gerhard up in Michigan. He just had an appeal hearing on his motion to dismiss. The appeal hearing was infuriating to watch because you have judges, appellate level judges, misstating the law on true threats over and over. And my blood was boiling. And the boiling point was much lower because it was also full of alcohol. So it was not a good thing. But this kid, the long story short, if you're not aware, is he's in the going to college in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He's about to head back for the semester, takes a picture of his AR-15 along with a duffel bag and a police cadet uniform, because he's in like the, young cadet program or whatever. And he says, can't wait to bring this bad boy up to watch the snowflakes melt. And then he had a subsequent Snapchat that said, and by snowflakes, I mean snow, wink face. And he sent that on Snapchat to his friends. Someone who he has blocked on Snapchat and has blocked him on Snapchat saw it on someone else's phone, determined it was a threat, and called it in. And he has been charged with felony threats, terroristic threats.
Yep.
Yep. And at his hearing, one of the judge said, not all speech is protected. For example, you can't hire someone to kill your wife. And the lawyer who I'm going to have the lawyer who argued it on Tuesday, but unfortunately we probably can't talk about his case directly because it's active. But he makes the point. He says, it's not the speech of you trying to hire someone to kill your wife that is the problem. It's the act. It's the actual solicitation.
What was he sentenced? What did he get sentenced with, Nick?
He's not sentenced yet. This was they filed a pretrial motion to dismiss. The judge said, no, this has to go to trial. The reason the basis for the motion to dismiss is that the Michigan law says if this is a presumptively First Amendment protected activity, you can't even bring the charge. And under you have to have, I don't want to say a heightened standard, but basically the prosecutor has to show that this is really a threat and not some otherwise protected speech. And his attorney brings up at this thing, the prosecutor kept saying that they have all of this evidence that will come about at trial. The judge even says, you need to stop talking about this evidence that will be brought up because we're only here to consider the facts. She's like, yeah, but I just want you judges to know there's a whole bunch of other evidence that will definitely come up and we will be bringing it. And he nails her. He says, wait a minute. If you have all this evidence, why isn't it in the charging document? Because according to the charging document, according to what you filed in the complaint, there is no factual basis to say that this is a true threat. You didn't put it in there. This should be dismissed. And the judges are just seem to be willfully ignoring it.
No,
and
well, just on that particular point though, as a prosecutor, you don't want to put all your eggs out there at the beginning. Sometimes you have to, but you just put the minimal standard. This is what I need to just get over, just survive, and then you could put everything else later. You know what I mean? So it's possible that they could have more evidence that they just haven't, or they could have developed it after the case was filed. So
right. No,
it's common,
that's fine. It's just in this particular case, when you've got a law that says that you have to show that this is indeed a true threat, and they don't include that extra evidence to show that it's a true threat in their charging document.
It's insufficient. That's what you're saying. Right. It's insufficient to go on.
And that should be grounds for dismissal. Plus, the prosecutor at the hearing goes through this. She's like, talks about like how the snowflakes definitely mean liberals, and the melting meant the melting of the snowflakes was akin to people dying because when the snow melts, they're no longer there. It's like, wait, you're doing like poetry analysis on this Snapchat to determine a true threat. This goes against all of true threat jurisprudence.
Yeah, well, this is not there.
There's the legal side, and I think the legal side is untenable. Then there's just the human side, which is like, if you post things like that, this was not even on social media. Another one where people are going to get the facts wrong. This was a private Snapchat message among friends. Whether or not, people have to appreciate how badly things can be interpreted in written form in Twitter, especially when you attach certain images. But that's the social media side of it. To go from there to a true threat under American law and prosecution for it and all that entails. That is legally questionable. At best.
And this should definitely be thrown out either at the appeals level or whatever. This is definitely garbage. But I do think, because I know for a fact I've had some investigations where one time we had somebody on, and shows you how I'm dating myself, but on MySpace, a guy was on MySpace and he had guns, and he was showing, but we're in New York and we're a very anti-gun place. So I was like, oh, this guy's got guns. His girlfriend's like, yeah, he has all these illegal guns. And so that gave us enough, not for a warrant, though. We actually didn't have to have a warrant. We went and had to knock on the door, and then it was like, oh, you could come in and search. We love the people who say, yeah, come search all our stuff. We're innocent, knowing that you got a key of cocaine inside. Like, of course, we're going to find if you allow us to search, but they allowed us to search, and we found, everything we needed to find. But yeah, but I don't think this case has, I'm just honestly surprised they charged it. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, and the prosecutor even admitted, well, we had a lot of school shootings going on at the time. It's like, well, that doesn't make this a threat. And then the other problem I have with the whole case is who's the threatened party, right? Like a true threat requires a target, and I don't think that the prosecutor can even articulate who the intended threat recipient is. And it's like,
isn't that itself? Isn't that literally Brandenburg? That it wasn't a specific person. They said go kill blah blah blah.
Yeah, Brandenburg, I mean, was a couple things. The imminent possibility to action, and then the reasonable. Yeah, the imminence basically is the big part of Brandenburg. Can what's being said actually happen, and without a specific target even present, and then without it being called? You'd think the weather felt very threatened. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. And remembering that the person who reported this and the key witness of the prosecution is someone who was not only not the intended recipient, but was blocked from receiving the Snapchat, and has also blocked the sender. And there's no instruction like, make sure you show this to so-and-so or anything like that. It's just literally he sent the messages to his friends, and they're talking about including his entire Snapchat history and all this stuff as evidence of this crime. And I'm like,
but that'd be propensity, though. I would object to that immediately. That's propensity. Like, just because you said something bad in the past doesn't mean that this was an actual threat. So that's
right. Yeah, the whole thing, this prosecutor is infuriating. Well, this is the one where at the hearing, now this is his prior lawyer that has since been fired. At his initial bond hearing, the prosecutor played the Christchurch shooting video from New Zealand as evidence that this kid should remain locked up. And the defense attorney did not object to this, which...
This makes no sense. His defense attorney didn't.
No, his defense attorney was his original defense attorney was way. I don't know what his deal was. He was way out of his game or whatever. But he did not object to the prosecutor playing the Christchurch shooting. And it was right after that video the judge said, "Yep, you're staying on an ankle bracelet forever." This kid's been locked down since August of 2019 for this.
Well, I'll say this: he has fantastic appeals in state court, and if he loses in state court, the next thing you go right to the district court, because I think this is a damn easy First Amendment issue. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
He can't leave his house. I mean, Jesus, how's he get it? Work? How's he get? I mean, that's horrible.
Yeah. I can't
bad.
imagine being 20 years old and losing a year and a half of my life.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially that. I guess at least when he's done, he can drink.
And just also another clarity: if anyone heard this, it was the chair, and it was not gas. I moved my chair back and made a very interesting noise. And we got sure. He's got to go for a walk soon.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up anyway. This has been, as usual, amazing. Locals. I haven't pitched it the whole show. I'm a pathetic,
touch.
Unstructured.locals.com. Ricadalaw.locals.com. VivaBarsLaw.locals.com.
And coming soon,
locals.com.
Hold on. My locals is being set up right now, so don't give me that crap. You give me crap every time. They're setting up my locals as we speak. So I will soon be Nate the Lawyer. Locals, whatever that it is, but it's going to be Nate the Lawyer.
Awesome.
Locals, so.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, everybody, please follow. Please consider subscribing. I have a show coming up later today. I'm really proud of it. Mark Robert is going to be co-hosting with me. It's the first of America's Untold Stories. This one will be about the CIA in Hollywood, and he's had personal experience with it. He co-writes with Oliver Stone. Amazing guy. We're going to be doing this series. That's the first one. We may be doing Children of CIA, and also other subjects like why is Lenny Bruce relevant today as he ever was then, and different historical figures in America all lived with him. A lot of it's firsthand. He's like the Robert Barnes of pop culture.
Amazing.
Walking inside, amazing dude. So I hope everybody considers checking that out. I also did a reaction video, which is very weird, being the old guy reacting these kids on the rap video, but give it a try. Tom McDonald, new song Snowflakes, and so far I've only gotten one boomer. What was it? This is some boomer shit comment. I was like, only one. I'm doing good.
All right. Well, enjoy. Everyone have a good weekend. And Sunday night, Robert Barnes, Viva Frei, and Nick, Nate, Eric. Good weekend.
Oh yeah, tonight my show is going to be a little late, but Kurt Uncivil Law will be in studio, and we will be drinking here at home, so it'll be fun.
Oh my
That's
God,
going to be
you have a medical standby?
and I got whatever I have this week. Eventually, it's going to come out, but I've done an exceptionally deep dive on voter ID laws, and I think it's going to be eye-opening. So you guys, if you guys want to know everything about voter ID laws, that video is coming out soon.
Awesome.